Welcome back to Jess Saying, where we tackle the messy and beautiful realities of parenting, relationships, and resilience. Today's guest, John Fela, is a dad, a former educator, and now known as the Swiss Army knife of disability advocacy because he shows up everywhere doing everything for families like his and mine. As a parent of a nonverbal teenage son with autism, he knows firsthand the struggle and triumphs of raising a child with special needs. And through his work with Joni and Friends, a global Christian disability ministry, he brings that lived experience to the bigger stage, helping families across the country find support, hope, and community. Get ready. This is going to be a conversation full of heart, faith, and real talk. Hey, friends, I'd like to welcome the Swiss Army knife of disability advocacy, if I can say that right, John Fela. Thank you for coming today. I'd like to welcome to Jess Saying.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, so take us on your journey a little bit. So you're a dad, right? You're a parent?
I am, yes, and that's how I always start out by introducing myself. I'm a parent of a child with a disability. That is really kind of my motivation for all of this and how I got started. So I have a 17-year-old son, Chris. He's autistic and non-speaking. That's a little slightly different from nonverbal. Normally we would say nonverbal, but technically non-speaking because he does have perceptive language.
Mhm.
He currently, I'm in the Chicago area. He grew up in the Chicago area. He's currently at a residential facility in Wichita, Kansas. That's not a forever placement. It's just so we can
Oh,
finish
that's
high school
far.
because it,
That's like
it's
far, right?
it's a bit. It's about, well, if you want to drive it straight, it's about 12 hours. Usually his stepmom and I will fly and when we go visit him just because it's easier, but depending on the nature of the trip, or sometimes he comes back home for the holidays, that kind of thing. So there's driving involved. But yeah, it just was the best fit for him because his public high school just wasn't meeting his needs. And we just had to make some decisions. And sometimes the decision is your child has to go a little far from home.
Right.
Um,
No, I get it.
yeah, and again, it's not a forever thing, but it does make, you know, this time, this season of life, it can make it challenging when you don't see him or, can't talk to him all the time, kind of a thing. So, but he's really how I got involved in all this. My background is actually in education. I was a teacher for years, mostly elementary school,
What grade?
including some special ed. Lower elementary, I would say I did a lot of K through 3.
Man,
I did.
we are kindred spirits, you and me. Let me just say, FYI, I used to own one of the largest preschools in my town, and I've done preschool we did it for like 15 years. Yeah. And I have a 15-year-old autistic daughter. She is in high school currently, and she's verbal, and she's autistic level 1, so she's not severe, but she leaves off the beginning and the end of words, so then you can't really understand her. And so
Mhm.
she uses her phone a lot. She's like, here's what I'm trying to say. But I can imagine how difficult it would be for you. I mean, having them be so far away, but I do know that like you really just got to do what is best for your kid and their development. And high school is just, and it depends on where you're at, but high school is a whole nother ball of wax. We all have, for the parents that have kids that are younger and we're dealing with it, you just don't understand when you get to high school, it's just different. And they won't accept, certain amount of like disability severity in high school. It's just, when they can't, I don't know how to put it. It's hard to explain, but like they basically will put them in a class and then they just won't even learn. Like that's what's happening to my daughter right now. She's just not learning, I think, like what she should be learning, but it's like you're at the mercy of your district, you know? I don't know. That's just my take, and I'm sorry I interjected because I really do want to hear your story. And I do this a lot on my podcast, so all of you listening, sorry, but I do interject a little bit. But I do feel that I feel like we're kindred spirits in a way because I'm like, yeah, like you're in education, I love that, and then we do have a lot. Keep going. I think what you're doing is awesome, and I think it's important to say it instead of me talking all the time. Sorry.
Not a problem. Yeah, and yeah, there was a lot we can speak to and go deep on for sure. But yeah, I came out of the education world, and I actually I started doing my advocacy while I was still a teacher, because what I learned, especially when my son was younger and we really struggled in the early years, and we struggled mightily, was the fact that I really didn't have any support, right? Didn't really have any community, didn't have people that understood me. And it's also very unique being a father, right? It's one thing to be a parent of a child with a disability, but dads and moms experience it differently. So I really found that I was kind of isolated on an island. And so a lot of my advocacy came out of my need and my desire to connect with other folks like me, and to really understand what was out there. And if things weren't out there and weren't available, was it something that I actually had to kind of create for myself? So
Why do you think that? Can I ask you a question real quick? Why do you think dads? Because I mean, I am a mom, and yeah, and I sit in all the IEP meetings, and I was the one that did a lot. I mean, my husband works two jobs, so don't get me wrong. He just is one of those guys that does the working part, and I do all the other stuff. But do you think that dads don't interject because they're afraid to, like, I don't know, like they don't understand? Or why do you think that dads don't step up more or feel like it's not their place to step in? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And it's a really interesting kind of dynamic. And when I've spoken to, and when I speak to parents and moms and dads all over, the kind of general setup that goes on with families is mom is the one who jumps in. We love our autism mama bears, so to speak. They jump in, they handle the doctors and the insurance and the appointments and the therapists. And that very much was my son's mom, who I'm divorced from, actually. But she was always a great mom and still is, right? She always did those things. For most men, what that means is, okay, mom is handling that, and maybe I support that or assist on some level. But most men, because men are fixers, will throw themselves into their work, and they throw themselves into their career, and they say, well, we have to have money to pay for all this stuff, so I'm just going to work really hard and we'll take care of it. The problem is that many times men, dads, get emotionally disconnected from the family, from the child, from the spouse, so that then there becomes this divide, this rift that gets created. And again, men many times, if they're not really looking at their feelings, there are a lot of things that can come into play. There's certainly guilt, there's judgment, shame, right? And especially for, say, for example, a dad, who has a son with a disability, and that dad may have had dreams of doing all of these different things with their son, right? Let's get him in, travel sports. Let's go fishing, hunting, whatever your thing is. Well, that may not happen now, right? And so does that mean that stopped being your child? No, of course not. But for a lot of men, it's hard to really come to terms with. And when mom is doing everything, and this was really the dynamic early in my marriage to my son's mom, is that when mom is shouldering that load, and willingly, I will admit, but she's shouldering the load. Um, and in my case, even if I wanted to be that breadwinner guy who just threw himself into his work, my son's mom and I were both teachers, and technically she always made more than me. So I wasn't even the breadwinner. I couldn't just write a blank check for anything. So I really had to face this question of what was my value? What was my real value in the marriage, in the relationship as a parent? What did I bring to the table, right? And in a lot of marriages, and certainly in ours, what happens is there becomes this judgment that gets created because, mom feels that she's doing all of this, and maybe dad is doing what dad knows to do, but, somehow there's an impasse there. There's an imbalance there, right? And if you're not coming together and communicating, and you're not working through these feelings individually, but also as a couple, as a family, then, that leads to why, for example, the divorce rate among families of disability is so high, right? And I won't quote a number because it changes all the time. There was a stat I heard actually just the other week that it's really 1 in 4 children will be the product of a family of divorce. Now that's any family,
Right.
and it's exponentially higher with disability. The stat I had always heard over the years was it's like 80% within the first 5 years of a diagnosis. And again, whether that is the actual number or not, the fact is it's exponentially higher. And there are reasons for that, right? So I faced the fact that I had an identity crisis. I didn't know who I was or what my value was. But what I learned then is not only the importance of needing to find community and find guys like me and people who understood me, but then also building into that and leaning into that so that not only was I getting the support and the resources I needed, and quite honestly, my family needed, but at the same time, I was also giving back. And I also found that I could use some of my creative talents and passions and things that I was excited about to also really help, facilitate a lot of new opportunities and relationships in terms of different organizations I started working with and that type of thing. But it really came down to being humbled to that point of saying, you know what, I'm lost. I don't I'm on an island here, and you know what, I'm having a hard time even connecting with my wife, let alone, connecting with anybody else, family, friends, or otherwise.
Your question real fast. So I see this with my own husband, and I love you, but my husband. But so I think there's a level of now. I I don't know if this is with you or not, but of not understanding the actual condition as well, and like putting expectations that are beyond what. Because my son also so funny, not funny, but not funny, haha, but coincidentally, my stepdaughter, she had ADHD and she has depression. And so we did a lot with her in school with the IEPs. And then my son has Asperger's. And but my son looks and appears to be like any other person, but his disability is hindering him. And my husband just doesn't understand because he's just never been involved in that part. And I tried to tell him, like, hey, my son just sees like just what's in this box. He's a concrete thinker. He can't think outside of the box. And he's just different. And my husband, there's a level of just not understanding the disability itself. And with my daughter, he's a little bit more engaged, I think, now that because my son is 24, and now that my daughter's 15, and Piper's had so many different types of things going on with her that I mean, he is just my husband's just heartbroken. He's like, whatever you need. He was almost like, you know what I'm saying? Like he's like, I don't know what's going on, or I don't understand. I do explain things to him, but he's more like, whatever you need, just you do it. But do you think that there's a level with dads out there that they just don't understand the disability? And then because like you said, they wanted to go play baseball. And, we threw our son into baseball and he was out there sneezing. We didn't know he was allergic to like grass and dirt and weeds. So he's out there sneezing, coughing, rubbing his eyes and crying. And so we had to realize that like, okay, this isn't working. So we tried other things too, but we just realized that like, we can't live through him. But I think I got off topic. But what I'm saying is, dads expect certain things out of their kids or out of son, and I just feel like there's a level of not understanding the actual disability when they're disengaged from everything that's going on. The day, in the schools too, they'll explain to you like how your child is acting when they're at school, because they act differently at school than they do when they're at home. And they have fits and they do things that like they don't normally do at home. And so they see your kid in a whole different light. And I know my husband, he went to one of our IEP meetings and he's like, what is that? Or my kid? Like, I can't, what? Like, she didn't believe it, you know? And so I guess what I'm saying is, do you think I don't know what I'm saying, actually. I think I don't know what I'm saying.
I think I get you. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because I could go on. No,
Yeah.
just teasing.
Yeah, no, it's it is very unique to the male experience and to being a dad, right? Because again, there is an expectation, and I think I see it more with dads of boys than girls. But regardless, it's hard for men sometimes to wrap their heads around. My child might not be normal, and what does that mean, right? And whereas mom, I think is just naturally going to be more of the nurturer. Not saying dads can't be nurturing, because I know plenty that are, and I would identify as that as well. The fact is that moms are going to just naturally jump in and love the child and just get the child what they need. And dads are going to kind of scratch their head sometimes and say, okay, well, how can we fix this the easiest and quickest way, right? And unfortunately, there is no easy and quick way. Now, some things can help, and maybe some things help better than others, depending on the child and the person. But the fact is that this is not about getting a magic pill from the doctor and fixing anything. So men need to be able to lean in. And I always tell the story about my own son, right? So, my own son, he doesn't have great motor skills. He's not coordinated or anything. He likes movement. He likes being active, but he wasn't one of these kids who could ever play like the buddy soccer or whatever, because he didn't have the focus, and honestly, I don't think he cared that much. But he liked being outside and being around other people. But he loves watching sports on TV, right? And he loves watching basketball and football, whatever. So when he was younger, we used to have a basketball hoop in the driveway. And, it's the same thing today. Like if we're ever, like at a gym or, at church where they've got a gym or something like that, I'll shoot the ball and he'll clap and he'll cheer because he thinks it's the coolest thing, whether I make it or miss it. He can pass the ball to me. He doesn't really shoot it, but he likes passing the ball around. He knows how to do that. And again, he just likes the activity. It's just fun to him. So will my kid ever play basketball? He could never play basketball in elementary school, high school, certainly not in college. He's never going to play in any kind of a league or whatever. But he just loves when he can mess around with daddy in the driveway or the gym or whatever. And that's fine. That's what my son can do, and that's how I connect with him. So I need to let go of my expectations. Okay, it's not going to look this way, but how can we still connect, right? How can we still have a relationship? And again, it's finding those things that they enjoy that you can lean into. And for me, again, my son loves being outside. He can go for miles on end just walking. Well, great, I like that too. That's easy. And again, there isn't anything super special about that except the fact that we're having that time together. So it
Right.
is going to look different, but we have to kind of adjust our expectations and to realize, okay, it's still my child, right? It's still my son. It's up to me to figure out how to have that relationship with him, as opposed to, well, I can't do this, and this, so now we're just done because there's nothing else in life. We men and dads need to, kind of expand their thinking a little bit. But again, they also need to get real with their feelings, which is a very hard thing for men to do in this situation, and rightfully so. But that's where I encourage guys, okay, maybe you're not a therapy guy, or maybe you're not a guy who wants to do counseling. Okay, that's fine. But do you have someone you can talk to? Do you have another guy who understands you? Because like in my case, when I started out and my son was young, I had friends who knew me and loved me. They had no advice for me. They had no idea what was going on. They couldn't understand it at all. So I had to get guys who understood my journey. And that's why I always say there are a ton of ways for guys to get connected with support virtually, in person. It doesn't have to be a big thing. If you like a group setting, I can recommend a bunch of things. If you just want to talk to one person, I can recommend a bunch of things for that too. But the fact is that get guys that understand you, because then that will allow you to process some of these things. And then, you might be able to, create a little bit better of a dynamic in the relationship with your child when you're at a place when you're saying, you know what, this can actually be great. This can be great, just like the relationship with any parent and child. It's just going to be a little different. That's all.
And also, I mean, as a mom and a wife of my husband, 28 years, but um, if you're putting in the effort and let's say you don't do the IEP meetings and you don't do some of the other things, but you're trying to connect with your child on any way you can, it will go a long way if you're having issues or, contentious marriage because of the disabilities and, that you're having to deal with every day. The wife will see you're going the extra mile and it'll go a long, long way. I'm just saying. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm just saying. Um, so can I ask you a question? Okay, so like you were an educator for like 20 years, right? Like for a very long time, right?
Yeah, just about 20 years. Yeah, just under that. Yeah.
So did that help you? Like when you did that help you with a child? You have a child with autism. Did all that experience help you with your own kid? Your own,
It did to a degree. I wouldn't say that it didn't, but it was interesting because before my son was born, I had no desire to teach in the special ed world or work with kids with disabilities. Not that I had any issue
right,
with
right,
anybody, but that just wasn't my calling before my
right.
son was born. Now, what's interesting is after my son was born, one, it definitely wanted me to learn more about working with kids with disabilities of whatever nature. But also I could reflect on some of my background. So for example, I actually was a Montessori teacher early in my career. And for those who aren't as familiar, some people hear Montessori and they think some different things. Montessori is a particular philosophy of teaching. So it's not just for preschool. There are Montessori elementary, and that's what I taught in middle school and even high school. But what was fascinating is as a Montessorian, you learn the value of a child's experience with, taking in input from their world, especially from a sensory standpoint, which is why Montessorians spend such a big focus in the preschool years and in the early elementary years on sensory experiences and materials, hands-on materials that they use for a whole variety of things. So in the typical classroom, we think about the using of, let's say, manipulatives, for,
Hmm.
counting and grouping and doing different operations. And in Montessori, it's all of that for every operation, even into algebra, believe it or not. So that perspective allowed me and really also to focus on the whole child and understanding that, okay, it's really not about everybody fitting in a box. It's about how can I work with and reach this particular child in terms of, their learning modalities or their strengths or weaknesses or whatever. So that allowed me a certain perspective. Now, I will tell you though, we did try my son in Montessori because I thought it would have been the best thing for him. And I will tell you, we unfortunately had a very bad experience, which I can share, because there was a school we lived where my son grew up. I grew up in an urban area, but my ex-wife, his mom, grew up in the north suburbs of Chicago in a relatively affluent area, and so there was a school that I was familiar with. And this place was a little slice of heaven. Like if you could be 5 years old again, you would want to go to this school. It was just one of these beautiful nature setting, bucolic, just warm, cozy. It was just amazing, right? And I knew the director. I had a friend who had worked there. I knew the director indirectly, and we did a tour and talked to her about our needs, and oh, we can make this work. Now to be fair, my son at the time was probably three-ish, 3 or 4. And so they actually had him start in what they call the toddler house, which is a specific toddler environment. Now, what's unique about this in Montessori is that when you walk in there, the first thing that you see as an educator or as a parent of a child with a disability, you think PT clinic because so many of the things there had to do with the children learning gross and fine motor skills. It wasn't as much about let's learn your ABCs and how to print or color, whatever. And there was some of that for sure, but you would see things that were actually designed to help kids strengthen their core and their mobility, and it was all just a part of it. So I'm like, well, this is great, and it was great for him until he got to the 3 to 6 year old environment, because it's usually grouped by age spans of 3 years. So that would
Hmm.
have been what they would consider, let's say, like a preschool setting. And unfortunately, and here's the real rub here, and I love Montessori as a philosophy, don't get me wrong, I do. The problem is that Montessori was actually originally created by Maria Montessori over 150 years ago. It was created by her to actually work with at the what we would call developmentally disabled, but obviously they had other names for it back then. But it was actually designed for kids just like mine, just like ours. The problem is that a lot of teachers get stuck in this box of, okay, but this is how we're supposed to teach, and this is how we need to teach. And it's funny because in a public school setting, you would have teachers or specialists do evaluations. You would create a plan, whether it's an IEP or a 504 or whatever. But in these settings, it was really more about, okay, the environment is the environment. We're not going to necessarily change it for another child dramatically. Not saying that it's not flexible, but my son presented a certain way. Again, not being able to communicate, and also just constantly moving. So he couldn't just sit and do an activity for 10, 15 minutes. He had to be moving. And that's
Mhm.
okay because movement in these type of classrooms are encouraged, but the problem is that the teacher just didn't know how to respond to him. And we even provided, he had started ABA. He had started an ABA clinic, right about that same time. We actually got one of the ABA therapists to shadow him and be like a buddy in the classroom. But the
Can I
problem
ask you a question
was that, yeah,
for my audience? What is ABA?
that's applied behavioral. And now I'm going to forget the other A, so now I'm in trouble.
Applied
But it's
behavioral. eh, Um. Dang it! I know because that my the doctor just told us that we need to get that for Piper. We need to start.
yeah,
My daughter's
yeah,
diagnosis came late because the chromosomes that anyways, we had her chromosomes tested when she was younger and it didn't say anything. So then we had her tested again when the technology got better and she came back with a 16p. It was chromosomal duplication, and a lot of 16p um, that have this autism is one of them. And so I knew that Piper was, when she was younger, it just didn't seem, she didn't seem right, but she just was cute. We're like, oh, she's just so cute. And then when she got to be a little older and you could see that it never stopped the same behaviors, and they're like, and so then we had her assessed, and the doctor's like, oh, yeah, she's got autism. And she had like telltale signs, like she does the whole shaking of the hands and everything, and a lot of the other things. But she likes to. She's very social, and she'll look you in the eye, and it's just so she has some characteristics that kind of fall in line with that. But underlying, she has an intellectual disability, which is her underlying disability, basically. Um, I kind of took you off focus too.
no, 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 that's fine. And it's actually applied behavior analysis that
There
just,
you go. You
yeah,
looked it
there,
up on the when I was doing my little rant.
yeah,
Applied behavioral, and that's right, because that's exactly what they told me she needs. And they don't. The thing is, in my town, they just don't have it. I live in a town that has no specialties, and anywhere you go, it's like you got to drive 2 hours to get there. But
yeah,
can I ask you a question?
yeah.
So, did we button that one this last part up, because I kind of wanted to move on to your faith and advocacy, right? Because you
Hmm.
you worked with, was it Joni and Friends?
Johnny and Friends.
Johnny and Friends.
Mhm.
Sorry, cannot pronounce names. So Johnny and Friends is a Christian disability ministry, correct?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay. So how
And
does faith shape the way that like you show up both as a parent and as an advocate? How does that factor in?
yeah, well, for me, when people ask me what's your best advice, right? I my best advice using my former teacher brain, I always say it's number one little a, number one little b. For me, my faith, my Christian faith is my foundation. That is absolutely what got me through some extremely dark times when we were first struggling with my son's disability. And I'm very clear about this that certainly if it wasn't for my son's disability, I probably wouldn't be doing any of the things that I do. And it's not to say that there aren't people out there who do these things, whether or not they have a child or a family member with a disability.
But you were
More,
motivated. You just were motivated more because it touched you personally in a personal way. And so a lot of people, there's a calling, and that's what they went to school for, and that's your calling just came because you were touched, your heart was touched in a special way because of your own child. So it's still no less a calling, but it's just a little different.
right, right. And for me, that definitely inspired my advocacy, but that's also how I became a person of faith as well. If it wasn't for his disability, I never would have had that experience either. So that really carried me through some very dark and challenging times. And then that really connects to my number one B advice, which is community, right? And I know for a lot of folks, and I talk to lots of special needs dads and families, many who are Christian, some not, some are really good dads, but they're not religious and whatever. And I always say, you know what, that's fine. I'm telling you my experience. I'm telling you what for me, my belief system is absolutely what is my foundation emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and all of it. But if you are not a religious person, if you're not spiritual, if you're not Christian, okay, but you must have community. You cannot do this without community. You cannot do this without other people. And ideally, the best thing for me is when those two things come together. So in my previous work for Joni and Friends, that was a wonderful experience because it's a ministry that definitely has a faith aspect to it. But what you see, for example, a great example of how this plays out is one of their biggest outreaches is something called Family Retreat. So we have there's about 12 to 15 offices around the country, and every office does a version of this. So wherever you are in the country, you can get plugged in. But back in 2013, my son's mom and I, we took our son Chris for the first time to one of these. Now in Chicago, the retreats are actually hosted up in Michigan at a retreat center that's about halfway up the Lower Peninsula, and it's a wonderful location right on Lake Michigan, and the experience is a family with a person of disability in their family, could be a child, could be a sibling, doesn't matter. However you identify as a family group, you get to attend. And it is a week where the person with the disability, regardless of age or condition, gets a buddy, a one-on-one volunteer that kind of shadows them, supports the family. The family gets to be refreshed. And again, here's the thing. There are organizations, there are ministries that provide, let's say, a camp experience for someone with a disability. There are Christian organizations that do this. There are just, plain old disability organizations that do this too. What's unique about this is that the whole family gets to go. And the whole family gets to have an experience of just having a vacation as a normal family with the supports they need. And what I just saw in these environments was not just the way that our child was loved by either their buddy or just the staff and the volunteers in general, but just also the experiences we had connecting with other families, being able to be with other moms and dads, being in a dad's group and sharing life, having, the moms get together in their small groups and share all week because every morning we would have that, having a men's cookout, and being able to hang out, having a parents' nice night out dinner that they would set up for us, and then being able to go on a boat ride on the lake and just enjoy life, and feel like a
Mhm.
normal family, normal person, normal couple. So that to me is a perfect example of where those two pieces of faith and community meet. And there's a whole other layer to this conversation. And this is something that I did when I worked with Joni and Friends, and I'm still also doing on my own as an advocate, which is working with churches in general, regardless of size or denomination, to accept people and families of disability, right? Because there are studies that have been done, and it's only about 1 in 10 churches that have any kind of a disability program or support or whatever it is. It looks different for different places and different environments. But the fact is that there are so many churches that have no support for anyone with a disability. And the problem is that there are families just like mine, just like, we were years ago, where you would like to have that church experience. You'd like to be able to attend. You'd like to feel like part of that community. But if you have a child with a disability, that complicates a lot of things. And if a church is not willing to extend itself to make it work, then that's a very, very important piece of life that you're not going to have a connection to. And the thing that I always emphasize is, churches that do that and do it well, they're not necessarily concerned if you attend the church or, even wherever your faith or belief is. They just want to love on you and they want to welcome you. So there are certainly families that may not identify with that church or religious even, but they still want to, be part of a community in that sense. And that's great. And many times that is what brings people to faith. And I can certainly say that for myself. So it all goes together. But I think the biggest point here is that people and families of disability are pervasive. They are everywhere. It is the number one minority in the world right now. It's 1 billion people around the world, right? Whenever we hear things that, well, I don't know anything about that because it's not in my world. I don't have a child like that, or I don't have anybody like that in my family. Well, you want to challenge people, just like I would challenge a church or, whatever, to say, listen, these people are everywhere. They're everywhere, right? You might not, it might not be right in your face, but they are in your communities, they're in your neighborhoods, they're in your schools, they're in your churches, whatever you got. Um, think about how you might be a friend to someone.
Okay, um, so when you're a parent with a child with a disability, a lot of times, and in my case, my kids don't have any cousins or any that live, I guess, anywhere near us, and I don't have a big family. I have nobody here in town, so um, they don't like I don't they don't my children don't have a lot of friends, and so churches that are out there, and you said, like you don't need to be from that church, but it's families like us that are desperate for our kids to make connections with other children. And it doesn't have to be kids with other disabilities, but in a lot of times it's those kids that are sweet and they're accepting of others because they themselves have issues. I have a great neighborhood, but the kids, when they found out my daughter had issues, she was a complex kid, they would say, "Oh, let's go swimming." "Not you, Piper." And then they would go off and play without her. And they would do that so often when we first moved here that my husband said, "That's it. We're putting in a pool." So he put in a pool for my daughter and it was the best thing for her. Because then she could invite friends over and she would invite everybody. They wouldn't come. She had one friend down the street, and Zoe, sweet girl, and they became friends. And so she had one friend in the neighborhood. But I'm just saying that it's very difficult when you have a disabled child to foster friendship. So if a church is out there and there's programs out there that are helping families like ours, it's a big thing. So I encourage that for sure. Okay, so let me ask you a question. So, so you're seeking, or have you trademarked? You're the Swiss Army knife of disability advocacy, correct? You're trying to trademark that?
That I'm jokingly trying to trademark it.
Okay,
Maybe I will at some point. We'll see.
I
But
get
yeah.
it, but I mean, what does the title mean to you?
It means that I have had a bunch of different experiences in life, and if I meet a parent or a family and they need help, I like to be that person who can, if I can't help them, I can point them in a direction. And where I've been lucky and blessed is that I've been able to connect with so many people doing so much amazing work. Faith-based, not faith-based, local organizations, national organizations, you name it. If someone needs legal help, I've got, my for those of you who remember Rolodex or know that reference, I can go on my Rolodex, metaphorically or otherwise, and I can look up the attorneys or the financial planners. You may need an IEP advocate, right? And I don't really do advocacy in the sense of going to the IEP meeting, but I have friends that do that as well. I can certainly connect you with support groups as a parent, mom, dad, together, whatever that is. Or just, let's say, and this is a hot thing for parents of adult children, like mine is a residential setup and long-term planning. What does that look like? Right. And I have friends that who quite honestly have started their own nonprofits, in order to create a residential setup, certainly for their own kids, but also for kids like them. So if someone needs something, I like to think that I can help them. And the other thing I emphasize too is this, especially for the parents and especially for the men out there, right? Who think, well, I have nobody to talk to. Well, I know a little bit about that. And I always say, listen, I can connect you with organizations, I can connect you with people, support groups, etc. But if you just need someone to talk to and you're like, I'm not ready for any of that stuff, you can just reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to anybody. I would never turn a person down who just wanted to have a conversation in terms of maybe they need something, maybe there's a resource, or maybe they just need someone to talk to. That's fine
And you're not
because
judging.
we need that.
But yeah, I think that's one thing men are afraid of, like being judged because did they fail in some way? Is their child defective, or I don't like to say disabled. I like to. Somebody told me we should start calling them complex. Our children have a lot of complexity. They're just complex, and so I'm going to start using that term. more and more. I'm trying to try. But I anyways, I just feel like what you're doing is actually really special, and I think I hate to say this because I always feel like our poor complex kids, they're always like, you were meant to do this because you were going to help somebody that's struggling spiritually or otherwise. And you might be bringing them to Christ. I mean, I'm not saying that, because like you said, you're not necessarily about, it's not about religion. It's about helping that individual with what they're going through. But you know, everybody's on their path for a reason. And I truly believe that you're doing some really good stuff. Um, can I ask you like an open-ended question? Because it's on my list of questions and I just thought I want to ask it. So if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing for families raising kids with complexities, what would that be? If you could change one thing.
You know,
Kind of hard question, I know.
I'm gonna answer it, and it's maybe slightly vague, and slightly general, but I think it is really a very relevant thing. And when people ask me why I do this work, and you certainly spoke to a lot of it, it's to help families like mine, help parents like mine. And again, there's a spiritual component. If it brings someone to faith too, awesome, great. Um, but I do the work I do because at the end of the day, my son is an only child, and I'm an only child, and his birth mom is an only child. So outside of, some distant, relatives, et cetera, whatever, step parents, at some point he's going to be all alone, and a lot of times in families like ours, when there's typical siblings, okay, sister, brother, both, however many there are, the parent kind of put it on them to help figure that out. Or when the parents are gone, somebody has to kind of step in to be a caretaker, support, guardian,
It's on my
etc.
mind. Trust me. It's
In my
on my
son's
mind.
case,
Right? I'm
yeah,
sorry. It is
yeah,
on my
right,
mind.
right.
And my husband and we are scared because like I said, I don't have a big family and, or one that likes me. So I just, yeah, I feel you. I know what you're saying. And, the other thing is too, one of the things that I think is so special about what you're doing is you're helping people at every different stage of their child's complexity issues, like when they're first starting off or they're just getting the diagnosis or they're like my daughter is in high school, which is a whole nother ball of wax for you families that are dealing with your 8-year-olds or your 10-year-olds. High school is different. And then the transition from high school to do they get a job or what comes next? Is there legal issues? How do you need conservatorships? And what does that mean? There's getting them on disability. Like I tried to get my daughter on disability when she's diagnosed with cerebral palsy at 2.5. I told you my daughter has got a lot of problems, but cerebral palsy, and they laughed at me and hung up the phone. So there are people out there I didn't know, or had you been around would to help me like 15 years ago. But to navigate through maybe that part of what I was going through, but having someone like you out there, especially helping dads that, like we said before, feel so disconnected from the whole process. Maybe they feel like they failed their kids or even failing their wife because they can't support them in the way that maybe their wife thinks that they need to be supported. Um, but for families out there that maybe are just getting their diagnosis, do you have any like words of advice? Maybe they're a good takeaway words of advice that they're just getting it or they just got it and they're a little overwhelmed. Do you have anything that you could say to those parents right now? Any advice?
Without, yeah, without question, do not do this alone, right?
Yeah.
This is a very, very difficult journey. And you will probably find that it's maybe a lot harder than you thought it would be. There will probably be all kinds of unexpected things along the way, just as I learned. And you need to, as a pastor once put it, relationships are like bank accounts, right? This is a very simple analogy, meaning you have to put deposits in so that when the rainy day comes, you have something to pull from. You have to be pouring into your families, your children's, your marriages, because the hard times come. And this is also something that we always talk to people about, from certainly from a spiritual level, but on every level, quite honestly. The hard times will come. There's no question about it. What will you have to pull from? What reserves will you have to pull from? What fireproofing did you put in place, or what foundations did you set up so that you have something to lean into and take from? So for families like this who are thinking, well, no big deal, we'll figure it out, or I'll just talk to the doctor, and it's not a thing. Well, it may or may not be a thing, but when it becomes a thing, then how are you coming around your child? But also, how are you as a parent, how are you coming around your child? As a spouse, how are you coming around your spouse, your partner in this? And what does that look like? And for many parents, they find themselves on an island very quickly, just like I did. So don't do it alone, though, right? Develop those relationships. Again, it doesn't mean you have to join 20 groups. It doesn't mean that you have to, listen to every disability podcast out there, because there's a lot right now. But the fact is that you need some people you can trust. And you need people that you can kind of walk through life with. Even if it's one person, and even if it's one close friend who's in a similar boat, that's fine. Start there. I always tell people, with community, it doesn't have to look the way it looks for me, or in terms of anything I did. Start small. Start intentionally, start small. And one of the biggest fruits out of the work I've done, and I didn't mention this, but for me, one of the biggest fruits, the products of me doing this work, are the friendships I've made, right? I have made really good, long lasting, genuine friendships with people I never would have met if I wasn't on this journey. So many wonderful people, families, people that, our kids play together, or whatever, or, we get together as guys or as couples, whatever it is. I never would have known that had it not been for this. So take advantage of those great fruits, because there is so much there. Don't do it alone. It's easy to fall into the shame, the regret, the woe is me. Okay, that's part of this cycle. You will experience that. It's okay. But then, as you're moving through that, then think about, okay, who is at least that one person I can develop that relationship with, and we can start to have a dialogue, and then see where that takes you.
I always say going to church is like filling up your spiritual bucket. And community and building friendships, and especially in the world of parents that deal with complex kids, I kind of feel it does the same. It fills up your bucket. It makes you feel less alone and connected, and it's like a tribe. Really, really, it kind of feels like you're belonging to a tribe. And I wish I would have had a little bit of that myself. I've dealt with special needs in my family with my children for the last 32 years. My stepdaughter's 32. So I'm I'm happy that you came on, because I think you have a great message, and you're out there helping, and you're doing, and like I said, you might be bringing some people to Christ, and I think that that is ultimately what we're all here to do. Spread his word and talk about him. I'm meant to talk about him. I wrote him about him. I wrote about him in my book, and we're meant to keep spreading that word. So, where can people find your information? Where can they find you? Online or
Yes. So
okay.
I often joke you can plug me into the Google machine and you'll find me. I do have a website. It's just my name.com, johnfella.com.
It's
I
Fela, just by the
That's
way.
right. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah. One L only.
One L.
And I will tell people that my newest, freshest content is not always up there, because sometimes there's a lag. So definitely just Google me if there's a podcast or something that, kind of comes out that's fresher. You can find that. But I'm on Facebook. I have, a dedicated Facebook page, which is John's Special Needs blog on Facebook. So you can look me up there, or, just find just plug my name into Facebook. Just find me in my regular account. I'm on Instagram at John_Fela_1. I'm on Twitter/X at it's actually J Felageller 74, because I actually had a different last name. That's a whole other story. But so it's J Felageller 74 on Twitter/X. Or plug me into LinkedIn or wherever else, just my name, you'll find me. And I also do have a couple of books that, at least by the time this gets released, at least one of them should be out.
Well, we didn't even
And
talk about the book. What the heck? Maybe we should talk about. Give us a little before we wait. Before we go, tell me a little bit about the book. I want to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have two books that I'm excited about. One is actually my memoir, and it's called Faith Like My Father. And it actually is the story of my journey as a special needs dad. And it reflects on my experience being raised by my father, who was not a dad who was really present at all, but wound up giving me the best life advice I could have ever gotten. Now you have to read the book to figure out what that is. But then it takes me through, or the reader through the journey of me as a special needs parent, struggles, coming to faith, eventually getting divorced, being a single parent for a few years, and then finding love again and getting remarried. So it's a great story of faith and redemption, kind of through that experience of disability, and then also reflecting on the lessons my dad gave me. So I'm excited about that. That should be out probably in the fall, but then we have another book that should be out in the spring of 26. It is technically not my book. However, I was excited to contribute to it. A friend of mine, Dr. Stephanie Holmes from the Atlanta area, is doing a book with Temple Grandin, and most people should know that name. So I got to contribute to that book. And that is actually a book that is geared for educators and therapists to give them a first-person perspective of either an individual, an adult with a disability, or parent of a disability, or in my case, someone who was a former teacher as well as being a parent of disability. So it really is a lot of great perspectives, and I got to be a contributing author to that. So very excited about that. So that'll be coming out. And then certainly if you follow me on social media, you will see all of those posts and promotions coming up for sure.
Awesome. Also, everybody, you can go to my website, www.jesssaying.net. That's JESSSAYING.net. And if you go to the podcast page of my website, and you scroll down and you go to the episode, and you look for John Fela, Fela, in the episode, you can click into his name and go straight to his website. Also, do you want your email? Look, I can put your email up there too. If they want to
Yeah.
contact you, his email will be present, and so they'll be able to find you from my website forever, because it'll be on there forever. And also, I did mention my book, so I'm going to go ahead and plug it now. Bucket List from a Redneck Girl. Go get it, Amazon. It's also it's a memoir about growing up, and I'll take you through all the crazy things that happened in my life. And so that's that. And also go to all my little websites, or my social media. I'm everywhere: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, TikTok. Did I say that? I'm getting a bigger following on TikTok. It's crazy. I never thought I'd do TikTok, but all of a sudden I've got like 6,200 people. I'm like, dang, I'm growing. So go follow me, go like under Jess Saying or Jess Danelle. All right, everybody. Thank you, John, for coming on. John Fela, Fela. That's how you'll find him online. He's everywhere. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. I appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care, everybody.